This is the Accidental Safety Pro, brought to you by Vivid Learning Systems and the Health and Safety Institute. This is episode number 17. My name is Jill James, Vivid's Chief Safety Officer, and today I'm joined by Katie, who is a safety specialist from the greater Milwaukee area and works in the manufacturing industry. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Katie, I am so excited to have you on as a guest because you are very new to safety and very new by way of haven't been doing it for that many years, but also you recently completed your master's degree in safety. So congratulations.
Thanks. Thank you. Finally done.
So, when I say recent, I mean like you just like within days, right?
Yeah. Like, right. Like I think the Friday before Christmas, I got the email that I had passed and I was finished. So woohoo.
Yay. Congratulations.
Yay. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a big deal.
It was great.
Yeah. Well, Katie, I'm interested to lead with the question that we always ask in the podcast is, how did you find yourself interested in safety? And I know I've heard a little tiny bit about your story and I can't wait to hear the rest of it. So share, how'd you get into safety?
Well, like I had told you when we had our first conversation, I don't think anybody goes to kindergarten and says, this is what I want to be when I grow up. When I went to kindergarten, all the other kids wanted to be, a firefighter or a princess or a doctor. And I wanted to be a cow cleaner at the Wisconsin State Fair. And that didn't really work out for me. I found out that wasn't really, the most desirable career path.
Okay, Katie, I've got to clarify, like, how did you find out about a job maybe as a cow cleaner, and what did that mean in your little girl mind?
So, when we were growing up, I have one brother, and we would go to the state fair with my mom and dad every year, and when you go through like the livestock barns outside of it, they have like these people are washing their cows.
Yes.
And I guess I walking through the livestock barns, I thought that looked like the best job, because I would see people bathing their cows before the cow shows. And I guess that was where I got the idea, because I hadn't really remembered that I said that until a little later on in my life. And my parents were like, oh yeah, no, that's not what you wanted to be. You wanted to be a cow cleaner. And I was kind of like, wait, what? So I got over that pretty quickly, thankfully, I think to my parents' relief. But
I figured you wouldn't necessarily be able to sustain a living and pay the rent.
Yeah, I wasn't going to be going to
simply by washing cows.
Yeah, cow washing does not, on its own, I'm sure, pay the bills and whatnot. But I did work in like a horse barn for a while, so I did get to try it out, and I did like brushing the horses, so it was nice.
There is something very therapeutic to working with animals. Absolutely,
it is. But yeah, actually, I was thinking a lot about this over the weekend since we talked about how I got into safety, and it's kind of always been, I think, something that was a very natural progression for me. My earliest safety memory is something that is actually kind of special, I think, for myself and my brother. When I was 7 years old, the Big Blue crane collapse occurred at Miller Park. 3 people were killed in that accident, and it was a huge deal. And I think it was the day afterwards, my mom took my brother and I up to the park nearby, and we surveyed the scene. And it was just such a profound moment for me, and I could not believe that had happened. I was pretty little, but it was just like, wow, it was nuts. And in the summers, my mom would have us keep journals, so we could like remember how to write and whatnot. And I recently found my journal from that summer, and it said a little bit about, how sad that was. And I just said, it was really sad that, people died at this accident, and I've never really forgotten it, and I think about that quite often. And I didn't know what safety, as a job was at that time, and the older I got, I would just think about that every now and then and be like, man, why did that happen, and how could this have occurred, and these people are still dead. It's horrible. And every time I go to Miller Park, that's what I think of. So
because it's hallowed ground there.
It definitely is. And, it was really kind of crazy. But when I was like a little older, I remember being on like a carnival ride with one of my friends, and I was pointing out how I thought some of the bolts were rusty, or how I'm not a big thrill ride person. I'm afraid of pretty much everything scary, heights, speed, etc.
Risk adverse.
Risk adverse. I really like that term. But I pointed out all these flaws, and my friend goes, someday you should be like a safety inspector because you could find these things. And I was like, oh yeah. And she goes, and you'd be the most feared safety inspector. And now looking back, I'm like, that's not really how it should be, but
no.
yeah, and of course, like many people, when I turned, 17, 18 years old, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And, I thought I wanted to study ecology because I love it. I think it's so interesting, and I really love the outdoors and wildlife. And I really wanted to go to school for that, but I'm very bad at chemistry and other math things that you need to be good at science. And someone that I knew that had studied ecology said to me, it's a great field, and if you have passion for it, you can be very successful, but I would recommend it as either a minor or something. So you can, have other options. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. But my brother actually was a freshman at UW Whitewater for occupational safety and health.
No way.
Yeah, so I
Two
learned
safety people in one family?
Yeah, it's kind of the double whammy. But through that, I found out that Whitewater offered a new environmental emphasis that would allow me to take the science classes that I really wanted to take, but still, be in, kind of a more active field where I wouldn't have to be outside year round in Wisconsin, and I could still, I don't want to say have a job at graduation because I don't really know how that works for ecologists, but I wanted something a little more guaranteed. So I entered my freshman year of college as a declared safety major, and had a few existential crises after that, but I stayed the course, and I got my bachelor's in safety and health, and then a few years later, my master's. So that's how I got here.
That's a great story, and I'm just thinking about your friend who was kind of calling you out on your expertise and being a predictor of the future when you were still really pretty young. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I was afraid of like everything. So, I think it was like the Ferris wheel, and I commented on how, anything that can be taken apart that quickly is probably not that safe or something. And, I don't want to ride on this, but I did it anyway, and I survived. So.
Well, I can tell you a Ferris wheel story. I had a coworker in one job ago who I was asking him, he was from South Africa. Originally, and I said, tell me your story. How did you get to the United States? And we were both working in the poultry industry at the time. And I said, how did this path happen for you? And he said, I was a Ferris wheel inspector.
Really?
Safety Ferris wheel inspector. Wow. And he followed this particular Ferris wheel that's set up at different state fairs, like you're talking about, where you wanted to be the cow cleaner.
Yes.
And right. And so his job was to travel around and inspect them. And when they would get set up, he'd have to ride the Ferris wheel and do his inspection, of course. And so he jumped on it one day, and sitting across from him in the Ferris wheel was his future wife.
Oh, wow. That's so great.
Right. And so there was a romantic story along with the Ferris wheel, in addition to there really are safety inspectors that go with the traveling Ferris wheels. So you and I can breathe a little bit better about our risk aversion, because I share that with you.
The Ferris wheel is a scary thing. I mean, those seats, they rock and it goes up high. So yeah, it's a little scary. Yeah. That's very cool though.
Maybe someone listening to this is like a real Ferris wheel inspector, and they'll want to be a guest on the podcast. So if anybody here has that expertise, Katie and I want to hear all about it.
I absolutely do. I really do.
So Katie, you finished your bachelor's degree. When you finished that, is that when you kind of dropped into your first job as a safety specialist, or did you need an internship, or what did that look like for people who are maybe just starting out?
Yeah, and I can really only speak to, my program, but that was a really big draw for me, was that to complete my program, I had to complete an internship for, I think, 13 credits. And I don't know if that's still the same credit amount, but that's what it was when I was a student. And so I had my final semester of school as an intern up in the Fox Valley region of Wisconsin. And I loved it. I mean, it was just the best time. We made military trucks, and so it was just super fun, and we got to like drive them sometimes. It was just really cool. And I graduated and got a job offer from this company on the same Friday. I've never been that productive on a Friday since then.
That's awesome.
But it was a good day. Yeah.
That's awesome. Did your program help you find that internship, or did you seek it out on your own? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a result of a guest speaker that came to our student safety organization.
Wonderful.
And I interviewed with him afterwards. So, participate in those kind of things, because that's a great way to seek out opportunities and network. And, even if you don't want the internship, because I mean, my interview with them was supposed to be a practice, and they sucked me in. I don't even want to say I drank the Kool-Aid, because it was a really wonderful experience. It was fantastic.
And so did you accept the job?
I did, yeah. I was very, very fortunate in my early career, and I don't think I know anybody else that has had this opportunity, where I was overseen by a safety professional who had many years of experience, and he supervised me. He was there every day, and so was I. So I had a lot of guidance, and then I also had multiple other safety professionals that I could spend the day with and learn from right in the same
company
with the company
in the same town.
with the
okay.
With the company. We had a big team, and it was so I was able to learn, and I was able to really get wonderful guidance. So I would have been kind of silly to not accept the job, and it was a great ride. Unfortunately, the defense industry does have layoffs in it, and it so I was laid off about like a year or so, like a year and a half afterwards, but that's okay. Like I said, I have nothing but wonderful things to say about that time. And after that, it took me quite a bit to find, where I needed to be and where I felt happy in this field, and where I felt like was the right place for me. And I really love where I'm at right now, and I feel like this is where I'm meant to do my best. So it's great.
So did you have a couple other stopping points after the defense one to where you are right now, or
a few yeah. And it's funny because I was listening to the most recent episode of this podcast on my way home today, and I noticed that the gentleman was saying something about how he was kind of spoiled because he had an opportunity to kind of like start over and work somewhere where it seemed really easy all of a sudden. And I think he was going from like a chemical plant to a hydro plant or something.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
And
that Harold.
Yes, that's his name. Thank you. So I kind of felt like that at first, where I got to join a company where I was the only one that did what I did. And looking back, I'm like, that was really stupid. I was very young. And while I have what I call first year safety pro syndrome, where, I thought I knew everything and I was super smart. Well, yeah, when you have somebody that you can default and ask questions of every day, who can tell you when you're doing something wrong, your job is a lot easier than having to make those decisions and tell people,
wonder if it's right.
Yeah, exactly. So that was really, really difficult, and I knew it wasn't for me. And then I had another brief stop after that, and that really wasn't for me either. But where I'm at now, I feel so much better. I am the only one that does what I do, but I'm okay with that at this point. One of the biggest things that I've learned is that mentors come in all sorts of forms. They don't have to be a safety professional to teach you how to be a good employee. So
yeah, tell us more about that. I agree with you 100%. But tell us more about that, especially if someone's just getting started and they're, looking for those mentors. When you say it's not necessarily somebody in safety, talk about an experience or what you learned that's valuable.
Yeah. A few years ago in the company I worked for, I had started out working for one safety manager who is someone I respect very much. He is super funny. You know, we get along really well. We still talk every now and then. But he left the company to seek a different opportunity. And, you know, he gave me really wonderful advice. He was kind of like, you know, I'm grouchy and I can grumble that, oh, you know, safety's dumb, but that's why I do it, because, you know, I want to make sure I do my best so that people don't have to grumble about it and whatnot. And he told me, you know, you're too young to have that attitude. Make sure you know, stay positive and whatnot. So I was like, oh yeah, great. And after he left, I started working for somebody else, and I kind of looked to that person to be my mentor, and that really didn't mesh. I felt like we didn't have the same values and we didn't practice the same way, and that person didn't really try to get to know me, which was really frustrating, because I felt like, you know, they didn't understand me. And, you know, I feel like I sound like, you know, that every parent's like 16-year-old, like, oh, you don't understand me, and, you know, you don't like the things I like. But it was difficult because I wanted to be my best for this person, and right. I felt like, you know, we weren't really clicking. So I ended up having a mentor in the manufacturing engineering manager at one of my locations. And he turned out to be a fantastic mentor for me. He would take me aside after meetings and be like, hey, I know that you're trying to pitch this right now, and I wanted to, you know, give you some feedback. I think that, you know, this way of pitching this idea, I don't think that's going to work because of XYZ. But I think it's a great idea. And I think if we tweak that a little bit, we can really get some success. And I'd be like, oh yeah, that's great. So, you know, he helped me a lot to get, like, you know, a really expensive order of security cameras, you know, approved, and all kinds of, you know, really great things like that. And he's still someone that I look to a lot. And, you know, on my last day with that org, you know, I sat in his office and I was like, oh, you know, my exit interview's coming up, and I'm really glad that you were here for me, and you know, looked out for me quite a bit. So, and we're still friends as well. You know, I talk with him quite a bit still, but that was really when that stood out to me, that I was able to learn something about my career from someone who didn't talk to me about safety. So that was cool.
Yeah. And he taught you some business skills.
He really did. He did.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was really great for Whitewater is they had a program when I was still in school for my bachelor's degree, where they set us up with mentors if you were interested. And my mentor was fantastic. We still speak maybe once a year. But he would really talk to me about, you know, what not to, I guess, let me restart. My mentor that I had through Whitewater would talk to me a lot about how not to lose myself in this field. And that was the best advice I could get. So.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean by that, but tell me what it meant to you when you heard that, how not to lose yourself.
Yeah, he told me, you know, priorities change, but values don't. And that is the most profound advice I think I've gotten in my entire career, and it applies to my life, you know, my work, everything. And he said, you know, your values may not change. Because I remember he asked me something about, you know, what do you care about? And I said, oh, you know, like my family and, you know, my dog or whatever. And he said, no, you know, what matters in life to you? And I had listed off a few things, and he just said, okay, you need to write those down, and you should never accept an opportunity that, you know, would challenge those values. You know, for example, like if you care a lot about the environment, you should make sure that you don't accept, you know, work with a company that, you know, does fracking or, you know, something that
would be adverse to your beliefs.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
That was beautiful advice. That was beautiful advice. And I've written in about that in a similar way before, and sometimes I call it the line in the sand. And knowing what your line in the sand is, and knowing, you know, especially when you're trying, you know, we don't win everything when it comes to safety, as you've probably picked up, even though you haven't been in it that long, but we don't, right? And so we know that there's business decisions that have to be made. Sometimes they're shades of gray, and it's not black and white and easy. But if you know what your value is, you know what your values are, rather, you know what that, you know, this won't happen on my watch, here's my line, then it makes it easier for you to know when you should dig in and when you shouldn't. And
I noticed, recall from your episode of The Accidental Safety Professional that you had said that during your time with an organization, that you realized that it was time for you to stop collecting a paycheck because
Yeah.
your beliefs did not align. And that really resounded with me really strongly because, I'm sure so many people have been there, and, it's okay to part ways, to
Mm-hmm.
say, I can't do this anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
it's, and to, after that, don't let it ruin your view of safety. I mean, I've had so many existential crises within my career where I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. What am I doing? And, is
Mm-hmm.
this even going to be, worth my time? But, never forget why you went into it in the first place, and,
Right.
what matters to you.
Yeah, right. And it goes back to those values. I recently did an exercise on determining what your two core values are. And you think, two, whoa, like how do you get
Ooh.
your values down to two? And it was an exercise I did in a leadership book I just finished. Called Dare to Lead, and it's by an author that I really admire, a social scientist named Brene Brown, and so I went through this exercise, and I had a team go through this exercise with me a couple of weeks ago too, where you come up with your two values, and my two core values ended up being dignity and perseverance. And I'm like, okay, perseverance, that makes total sense to me. Like, I do persevere through things in my life, and I can come up with all kinds of personal and professional perseverance stories in my head. And then dignity, I'm like, yeah, that's why I get kind of riled up at certain things. If I feel someone's dignity, whether it's my own, a family members, and employees, people aren't being treated the same or fairly, that kind of gets under my skin.
Yeah.
And so since I did that exercise, when I'm really into something, whether I'm thinking this is the best, this is the most fun, I'm so dedicated to this, I want to see it done, or ooh man, time to dig my heels in, line has been crossed. I look at
Yeah.
it and go, which value is this? Oh yeah, it's that one.
I really like that.
Yeah, and anyway, so I took a team through it, and everybody came up with something different, and we shared stories about why did you pick that, and what does it mean in your life, and how do you live it out in your home life and in your work life. And so it was.
I really like that a
Fun.
lot.
It
I'm
was
I'm
fun.
definitely gonna pocket that idea for later. I've got some places that we can certainly use that. That's very
Yeah,
cool. Thank you for
that's
sharing.
fun. Oh yeah, you're welcome. So I'm interested to hear you've been a practicing safety professional for how many years now?
I am coming up on my 6th year in June, but
That's
I still
awesome.
feel like it's only been a year sometimes.
Yeah, like the line is, hello, my name is Katie, I'm just getting started. Hello, my name is Jill.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. That's life. It's always a chapter, chapter next, chapter next. So, at what point did you decide that you're going to go back to grad school, and why did you decide to do that?
That's a great question. I decided about 3 months after I got out of school that I wanted to go back to grad school. And I think my big reasoning for it kind of goes back to that saying that, you do your undergrad because you have to, but your graduate work is for yourself because you want to. And I think that's really true. I chose to go back to school because one of my long-term career goals, hopefully all things go well, I would love to teach someday. That's quite a distance someday, and in order to be a credible professor, you need to have quite a bit of acronyms after your name, if you will, and that's felt like the most natural choice for me. In addition to I love to learn, and I'm sure some of my professors are hearing this and they're probably chuckling because they remember how horrible of a student I was at times. I'm not a great student. I'm really bad with due dates when it comes to my homework sometimes because I get really caught up in wanting to find this one answer or overloading a certain, topic and whatnot. And I would have to back up. And that was something that I learned in time, thankfully, for grad school. But I wanted to learn more, and I was looking forward to taking, version 2.0 of my classes from the professors that I so admired.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
it sent you back to grad school. So so you've been successfully doing a job and going to grad school at the same time. For anybody who's maybe thinking about that, how did it go for you? And do you have any advice for people who might be in the middle of it or contemplating it?
I mean, do it. The only person that can hold you back is yourself. You have to make the time. You really do. And I can't really say it was that difficult for me. I mean, it was, I guess, but I don't have children. I'm married, but we don't have kids. So I look at some of my classmates who have kids and a job and, have so much more on their plate, and they made it work very, very well for them. But what I would say is use your calendar, make time for your schoolwork, and, of course, make sure you apply, it's your work to your schooling and your schooling to your work. But, yeah, I mean, if you want it, go get it. Yeah.
Wonderful. And so while you were in grad school, were you able to apply what you were just saying? Like, were you sort of using your current job for a test ground to test out new things that you were learning?
Yeah, definitely. I have, a couple examples of how well it went. I guess I'll pick like one. I had learned through my job how to do 5 why analysis, and we were in my system safety class. We were reading. We were having a discussion about how a particular accident could have been prevented. And I don't remember the exact boat name, but it was like a boat that sank in England, and they had to, they opened these bay doors to vent out some smoke, and the boat got swamped and sank. And I remember being able to use that 5 why tool really was a lot of fun and I felt like I was like, yes. And I got to the conclusion that, well, they shouldn't have to open those doors. Like, the smoke is the problem. And my professor was like, there you go. You got it. I was like, yes. So that was, a little win. It was good. Yeah, I definitely had a hard time with, like, I remember I was very young still. It feels weird to say that sometimes, but I was like only like a year or two into my career, and I was taking a class on disaster response and recovery, which was amazing. I loved it. And I had to kind of like write a business continuity plan. And I didn't do very well because I was like, oh, my site doesn't really have an emergency response plan that is like really thorough. It was kind of like, oh, if there's a fire, everybody leave. So that I struggled a lot with. And looking back, I would have reached out to some of my resources a lot more, and I would have asked for help. But I was, young, and like I said, I thought I knew everything. So I was like, oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It was not fine.
And then on the flip side, did having the experience you did in the career, the years of experience you had, and the fact that you were actively working in the practice, do you think that enriched or helped your pursuit of your master's degree as well?
Absolutely.
Compared
Absolutely
to being in undergrad.
Yeah, absolutely it did, because I remember being an undergraduate student and not knowing what the heck we were talking about sometimes, because like many fields, I'm sure, in safety, we don't always understand it on paper, but in practice, it's like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of, a lot easier the second time around to be able to say, oh, here's my example of this, or I can apply that particular tool to this. It was a lot easier and more fun. Yeah.
So, Katie, I'm interested to hear, how have you worked on building your street cred? As someone new and female in our industry, young rather. And what sort of things have you done, can't believe you did, or was a great win, or something that might plant a seed for someone else?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking about this with someone today about how, being a female in manufacturing can be kind of weird, but I'm okay with it. I mean, a lot of my good friends are boys. So, I was often one of the only women in my class at school, or, whatever. So I was kind of just used to it. But for me, I think the biggest thing that has really helped me build my credibility is to always be myself. I have tried to be other people, to make, a boss happy or a plant manager happy. And it just, there's never really a role you can play as well as you can play yourself. So, that really helps me. And I've had people say to me, one of my mentors said to me, he was like, you're kind of out there. Like you can be a little weird sometimes, but it works for you and it works for us because you're always yourself and you're a real person. I don't try and, act like I know things I don't know. I am the first person to say, hey, I really don't know what that, what you're talking about. Can you, can we go look? Can you, talk me through that a little
Tell
more?
me
And
more.
that seems to help. Yeah, that seems to help a lot because people see that, I do genuinely care and whatnot, but, I need them to teach me a little more. And I think that kind of helps because it gives, they see that, I don't care what your job title is. I respect you if you, are a respectful person.
Right.
And I'm, I know that every person has a lesson they can teach me. And that
right.
seems to have helped the most.
You're being authentically yourself and that's your value. That's wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
that's great. And, so true. Everybody has something to teach us, right? Whether it's the a thing that we would never replicate and we go, oh, I would not do that. Or that is a great tip, tool, learning whatever it is, someone's tribal knowledge that they share with you. And, we kind of file all that stuff away.
Yeah, I had a gentleman stop by recently after a training, and it was so fantastic that he did this for me. I think he works in like one of our assembly departments. He's a great guy. For listening. Thank you. He stopped by and he said, I think you're very young, but you're very smart. And he said, but I noticed, he's like, I think you have a nervous tick where you like play with your hair a little bit. And I was like, oh, wow. Hey, that must be really annoying. And he was like, yeah, a little bit. I was like, thank you so much for telling me that. I actually really appreciate it. And he was like, I can't tell if you're like saying that because you want me to leave. Or I'm like, no, I really appreciate it. Thank you. That I'd be a fool not to listen to you because obviously it was memorable and I don't want you to just remember that. So, and now I'm very mindful of that, and I'm really glad that he said that to me. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I personally try to remember that about my Midwest accent, but it just doesn't work when I'm working on trying not to accentuate my O's. But
oh, me too. It happens
both of us being
the
from
time.
The Midwest. Yeah.
I didn't think that was a thing until I listened to a training I recorded, and it was like, oh God, that was painful. It was like so Wisconsin.
That's awesome. So Katie, with regard to like business acumen, because you were telling a story earlier about the mentor who pulled you aside when you were trying to do an ask for something that you needed to acquire some funds for and get approval for. What are some best practices or things that you've learned or that you'd like to share? Things that are outside of safety but impact our practice so much.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've learned when it comes to, being good at sales is, especially when it comes to safety, because there's not always a really obvious return on investment for that. Pick battles that are small enough to win, but big enough to matter. And that, I think, is, thank you. I wish I came up with that. I don't know who did, but it is so helpful to me. There are battles that are really important to fight, and sometimes you have to win something else first. I know recently we had wanted to purchase some fall protection, and someone was really frustrated. It's like, oh, I tried to do this like 3 years ago and they said no. And it was like, well, so-and-so is, has just gotten the purchase approved. Like, we should have asked her forever ago because she, was able to get that done. And it's okay if you need someone else to fight the battle for you. I accept all the help I'm offered. So that helps a lot. But then also I think, it's okay if you have to change your mind and say later on, actually I want this, or actually this could work instead. I'm going through some of that right now with a learning management system where, it isn't necessarily going perhaps as we'd like it to, but my view on it is changing. Hey, it would be really cool if we, instead of buying all these courses, if we made them ourselves, because we can brand them and we can, have, various, employees from around the company participate, and it's fun when you hear your friend in
Mm-hmm.
your training. It's like, oh yeah, that's awesome. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that was
Yes.
really specific. Sorry.
No, it's really good. So you're talking about triaging. Like you said, you're
Yes.
trying to figure out what is big enough to matter, but at the same time, you're going to you're going to find those. You might change your mind on the process because you're learning
Yes.
more as you're moving through it.
Yeah, you gather new information and you change, how you process it or what you do after you've processed it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I remember in the beginning, I used to want to do everything my way instead of prescribing to, wherever I was at that time. And sometimes it's really nice to not be such a control freak and to,
Mm-hmm.
sit back and say, what you have is fine. If it meets the requirements, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to force you to change if it's not broken.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and
Pick up.
that helps a lot for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, pick something somewhere else where you can have a what did you say? Small enough to win, big enough to matter. Where you can
Yes,
have a bigger
small enough to
matter.
win,
Yeah,
big enough to matter.
yeah,
Definitely.
that's great. That's great. So I'm curious to know, since this crane collapse in Miller Park was
Yes.
so impactful to you when you were little.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any opportunities to work with or around cranes in your 6 years yet?
Not with those cranes.
Mm-hmm.
My brother did for a while. He was in construction safety for quite a few years. But he decided it really wasn't for him anymore. But yeah, he actually got to work with the gentleman that was I'm not sure how familiar you are with that whole story, but OSHA was on site the day that happened and took the video of
Hmm.
it falling. And my brother has worked a lot with that gentleman. He's so wonderfully smart. But that definitely kind of made me afraid of big cranes.
Mm-hmm.
But we talk about it every now and then in our crane training courses that hey, if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of refer back to that scenario sometimes, even if I don't mention it. It's definitely on my mind that's what I'm remembering.
How interesting it stayed that close to your family.
Oh yeah, definitely very. I mean, you know, we're we're all Milwaukeeans, and so that was kind of always there. And I remember as well, kind of even crazier, a company nearby to that accident had a serious explosion when I was in high school. And I ended up actually working for that company later, and I was able to kind of learn how that affected them. And that was really, really interesting to see the impact that it had, even, 10, 15 years later
Mm-hmm.
on these people, and really how they, did safety as well. It was crazy. So big safety memories for me.
Yeah, right. And really how it impacted individual human beings, and it seems like that's a part of what drives you in your
Absolutely,
career.
it does.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
does. I mean, I think we all, sometimes it gets tiring to say to yourself or to others, I want you to go home the same way you came in. Like, I don't want to say that anymore sometimes. And I'm like, do you like having fingers? Because I do. Or, what do you care most about in your life? Is it, your kids or your grandkids? Like, do it for them or, whatever. But I tell people when we talk about, really serious accidents. I'm like, they got up that morning just like you and I did today, and they may have hit snooze on the alarm just like we did. They
Mm-hmm.
packed their lunch just like we did, and they did all these things. They were real people, and that is something that never is lost on me, is that
Mm-hmm.
these are people with
Mm-hmm.
real lives, and everybody is a people with a real life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's definitely a driving force.
Yeah, it is. It is for me as well. So, Katie, I'm interested to know what is your favorite piece of safety, or what is your favorite or task? Like, what do you really love doing? Since I mean, it may be hard to narrow down because because the scope of our responsibility is quite great. But what's your favorite thing
Yeah.
right now?
Um, I can say my least favorite thing I would say is ergonomics. I'm really bad at it. I'm good at the problems. I'm just bad at the solutions. So I like to contract that out. But
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite thing about safety isn't any one individual thing. It's that I get to be every single thing I ever wanted to be, except for the cow cleaner, every day.
Yeah.
I get to be, a little bit of a lawyer or a nurse or a teacher or,
An
Nancy
ecologist.
Drew. Yes. Yeah, it's funny. I don't like doing environmental. I'm really bad at it. I really wish that I loved it, but it's so hard for me. So I'm happy to pass that off to someone else. But I get
those laws are hard.
they're so confusing. It's tough. But yeah, I get to do everything I ever wanted to do. I get to, be an investigator and play Nancy Drew and do all those fun things. And I really love that I can, I'm one of those people that like, I get lost when I'm really learning about something. I want to learn everything I can possibly know about it.
The whole plate of knowledge.
Yeah, I click on like the references on Wikipedia all the time. I love them. So, I really love that aspect of safety, that becoming that subject matter expert, or even, just diving into a problem and, realizing, oh, I have to learn about this before I can fix it. I really love that part of my job.
Yeah, lifelong learner. It's what's setting you up, Katie, probably to be that the professor that in your long-term goal, goal of being
someday.
A professor, right? Yeah, and
Yes.
it would. I think I'd like to mention here as well. You and I are talking about your education in safety and how you've gone about it and what the path has been for you, and you've mentioned your alma mater, the University of Wisconsin Whitewater campus. And in episode 7, for anyone who's been following the podcast or is just starting, I have a conversation with one of Katie's professors, Dr. Todd Lusheen. And in that episode, Todd really takes a deep dive into how do you educate yourself in safety, whether it's formal education like Katie's talking about right now, or whether it's how do you self-educate, or maybe it's doing some of the things that you're talking about, Katie, and it's reading and reading and reading and teaching yourself and becoming an expert in a particular area. But episode 7 really kind of takes a deep dive on different ways that you can educate yourself in safety, whether it's with a formal education or outside of that.
Oh, definitely. And Dr. Lusheen is like he's kind of like when I have a really bad day, I'm so excited now that I have this podcast that I can listen to, because he is such a motivator for me. I mean, on like my worst days, I remember the time that he told me, he was like, yeah, there were times I thought you were going to fail out, but you did it. And I'm like, yeah, I did. So, I was, like I said, I was not the greatest student when I was younger, but, yeah, he's such a great resource. I mean, I know he said, you can reach out to him, but he's so, passionate about education and so helpful in answering those questions. It's great to have.
It's great to have a collection of mentors.
Oh, it absolutely
and
is.
people you can reach out for different pieces of advice in different chapters of your life.
Oh, absolutely. I feel very spoiled as well to have kind of grown up in this profession at this time, because, I feel part of, my friend Jason and I, he went to Whitewater with me. He and I like to say we're like the new school of safety, where we are fortunate enough that we are really never alone. We have each other, and we have, I have other friends that are in safety, and, it's a very small group, because you got to be careful what you say to people. You don't want to divulge too much to the wrong person or what have you, but those friends that I have in safety are so fantastic for me, because when you want to talk about it, like my poor husband, I'll come home and be like, and this guy was hand polishing on a lathe, can you believe it? And he's like, that's bad, right? I'm like, yeah, that's bad. But I can text that to my friend, Alicia, who works across the country, and she'll, are you kidding me? And what did you do? And I'll be like, oh, do you have ideas about this or whatever? And it's so nice. But we're in that time where we have classmates or coworkers that did this with us, and we get to grow up in this field together. And I feel like that's rare, but it's really starting to become more common, and I'm so grateful for that.
Well, you're right. Our practice is small. We're a small cohort compared to, other professions like, accountants or something.
Oh yeah.
And it's true. Many of us do know one another. And Katie, I think you're right. Ours is one of those jobs that's a little bit tricky to bring home, because people don't understand it, you know? I do the same
Yeah.
thing. I do the same thing with my family. I'm like, how was your day? Well, you know, if I really went into this, you might fall asleep. But I can call one of my friends in safety, though we may not work together, and we can talk about it, like you said, and we can problem solve. And, you know, same thing happens with me. Safety professionals from around the country will say, you know, I'm kind of stumped on this one, or I just need somebody to run this by. This is what I'm thinking about doing. Can we talk about it? And it, you know, I think it's really important for our profession that we keep those, professional friendships alive.
Absolutely.
Because we're there to help one another in the end, because our work isn't proprietary.
Oh yeah, and it's, I can't tell you how fantastic it is. You know, in this part of Wisconsin especially, I'm not sure how true this is like nationwide, but you know, it's a growing field for sure. But in Wisconsin, it's kind of like if you didn't go to Whitewater for safety, like nobody knows who you are. But like I didn't really realize how everybody went there. And so it's kind of like, you know, you really can't burn your bridges, and you've got to be careful what you say, but also, you know, usually it seems like if people are still in this field that went to Whitewater, you know, it's because they love it. They, you know, like, and they're good at what they do, and they're good people. You know, you've got to keep those communication lines open. And I mean, if someone's already done the work, you know, ask them for help. Like today I asked my friend for you know, hey, could you send me this PowerPoint that you have? Or, you know, oh, do you have any, I like a lot of like, I like to try to be funny a lot. So I'll like, if I make something safety funny, I'll like send it to, you know, one of my safety friends, and it can be really nice because they're like the only ones that get the safety joke. And it's so nice. I can't tell you how nice it is to, you know, have that network, and still to have, you know, this podcast as well, to be able to hear from these seasoned professionals that I can learn something from every single one of them. It's just fantastic time to be in this field, especially as a newbie.
Yeah. So as we're rounding out our time together today, Katie, is there advice that you have for someone who's maybe just getting going, or someone who's sort of at their same career place as you, that you'd like to impart?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give myself, especially, that's kind of what I look at it as, don't give up. You know, if this is what you want to do, it is not always easy. Sometimes you need to like go to your car and cry, or say bad words or something, because it can be really hard. But, you know, don't let, you know, a bad incident, or, you know, a bad, you know, workplace culture, you know, really ruin the field for you, because you went into this for a reason, because you care, you know, because nobody goes into this because they want the money, or because they want, you know, like the street cred, if you will. Like everybody groans when they see us coming. Nobody wants to, you know, it's not like a field where it's a thankless field. Let me say that. It's a thankless field, and you can't let that wear you down. You know, you gotta, if you love this field, you'll make it work, but don't be afraid to search for those places that make you feel at home, and make you feel like, yes, I can do this. And I do feel like I'm making a difference, because you might not be in that place, and that's okay. It's okay to walk away.
Great advice, Katie. Great advice.
I hope it made sense.
It did make sense. And I think that's a great place. That's a great place to leave it, as well as the quotable quote that you said that you can't take credit for. Fight for things that are small enough to win, but big enough to matter. And
yes, pick your battles.
And to remember to mine out those mentors wherever they are, whether they're within your own workplace or within your own discipline. Mentors certainly matter. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today, Katie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. And thank you all so much for joining in today and listening. And thank you for the work that you do in safety to make sure that people are going home with all of their fingers, as Katie alluded to earlier. And you can listen to all of our episodes at vividlearningsystems.com, or subscribe in the podcast player of your choosing. If you have a suggestion for a guest, including if it's yourself, please contact me at social@vividlearningsystems.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.